Good morning, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with a severe weather outlook and discussion recorded on May 5th, 2023, recorded around 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot of things to go ahead and jump into today, so starting off here with the severe weather outlook. We have a pretty active day in store across most of the U.S. today. Two areas of slight risks, level 2 out of 5, one down there across portions of southern Texas, and one in the Great Plains, including northern Kansas, northeastern Colorado, back and through Nebraska. If we look actually at the tornado threat for today, we have several 2% areas. Again, one out there in the Great Plains, one down there in southern Texas, and one in the Gulf Coast states from about near Mobile through near New Orleans. We have a 15% hail probability with significant hail possible both down there in southern Texas and in the Great Plains, and we also have a 5% wind risk across portions of the Great Plains, down there across southern Texas and central Texas, and out across the Gulf Coast states. Again, generally speaking, far southern Alabama, places like Mobile, into southern Mississippi, and southeastern Louisiana, especially along the coastal areas. In terms of tomorrow's forecast, we have a slight risk for severe storms generally focused around and just east of the Kansas City area from about Peoria, Illinois through St. Louis, Missouri, Kirksville, Missouri, and southeast of Des Moines, Iowa. Tornado threat for tomorrow is a 5% area, generally from about Kirksville, Missouri, through about near St. Louis, with a broad 2% area from about Kansas City, Des Moines, and Peoria. And then also another 2% area down there across portions of Oklahoma, back stretching through southern Texas. Wind and hail threat for tomorrow. This is the hail threat 15% area, again around Kirksville, St. Louis, and Peoria. And also a 15% wind risk across these same areas. Damaging winds, large hail seem to be the primary threat here, but we cannot rule out a few isolated tornadoes. And we'll talk more in depthly here about this threat here in just a moment. And as far as our day 3 threat goes, we have a slight risk for severe storms. We have a 15% area from just about near St. Joseph and Omaha, straight through near Des Moines, Iowa, Cedar Rapids, just to the south of Mason City, and stretching into far southwestern Wisconsin. So we have this risk for severe storms. Generally speaking, this is going to be much more of a wind and hail threat. Cannot rule out a few isolated tornadoes again. We're going to get into all the specifications and details here in just a moment. Looking at the current conditions out across the contiguous U.S. right now, we notice that in our risk areas today, we have southerly flow at the surface and just above the surface, combined with an area of low pressure that is developing out there across portions of the Oklahoma Panhandle, Texas Panhandle out there. And what this is going to do is surge our moisture northward as we progress throughout the rest of the day. We can actually see here that temperatures, the dew point temperatures this morning in Dallas actually increased from about 63 degrees all the way up into the 70s, and dew points area-wide have been climbing quite nicely. Now, dew points up to the north are still a little bit on the lower side, but one of the things to kind of remember is that in the higher elevation terrain, especially places like Denver, when you have a risk for severe storms, the elevation is higher, so you don't need dew points in this upper 60s to support a tornado threat. And again, there is that tornado threat today, again, that 2% area. With that southerly flow being advected up and those dew points being advected northward as well, I do suspect that we are going to see an elevated tornado threat. Again, 2%, so elevated tornado threat across some of these areas today. Generally speaking, that southerly flow at the surface should allow for temperatures and dew points to climb nicely and instability to build, combined with that little bit of a surface pressure falls there that allows for lifting in the atmosphere and thunderstorms to generate. You can see what's actually causing this increase in severe weather today. We have this big trough of low pressure that is digging in out across portions of the western U.S. right now. And we notice that there's elevated flow out here, roughly about 70 knots of flow rounding the base of this trough. And if we actually look here at the 500 millibar heights, we notice again, generally speaking, in the center of this upper level trough is generally right around into the northeast of Redding, California. But this trough is generally ejecting towards the east here, and this is going to pave the way for increased lift out in this general vicinity. And this has kind of been the story for the last several days. This very slow moving trough creates lifting over the Great Plains, and we lead to an increased severe weather threat. So with the 500 millibar winds here being generally on the order of about 65 to 70 knots, that will somewhat eject over the central U.S. today, combined with the subtropical flow, which is all of this enhanced flow down to the south, that is going to lead to an elevated tornado risk, especially, I think, out across the south where these ingredients come and combine a little bit together there. So generally speaking, then if we go to the 700 millibar winds, again, we're looking now lower in the atmosphere at about 10,000 feet. Again, that's kind of confined over some of the risk area for today. Generally, though, over the Gulf Coast states where we have that 2% risk. And also something to keep in mind here, the 850 millibar winds. This is our low-level jet, and we have roughly about 30 to 35 knots out across the central Texas into the Red River area for today. This will weaken with time. You can kind of see how that has been weakening and shrinking with time. That's just a natural response as the day progresses. However, again, that low-level jet will come back this evening. So it is just something to kind of keep in mind, and we will be watching for that increased lift and severe weather potential out there today. So our forecast models for today are generally depicting a couple of scenarios possibly. So first of all, we'll start off this morning here. This is about 8 a.m. this morning. We notice that we have an ongoing complex of showers and thunderstorms out across portions of Mississippi into Louisiana, and this will be somewhat responsible for the overall severe weather threat out there today. And elsewise, we have a few ongoing storms out there currently across portions of Kansas. We continue to roll this forward, and again, we get a new generation of storms to develop out here back in the southern part of Louisiana, and this again will be responsible for that damaging wind and potential tornado threat going into the early part of today. Elsewise, it's actually relatively quiet out across most of the central U.S., just a few scattered showers and storms around coming into Des Moines here roughly at about 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then we can see a few scattered showers, generally widespread showers actually out across portions of the northwest U.S. associated with that broad upper level trough. But that trough eventually ejects eastward and does spark the initiation of widespread to scattered showers and thunderstorms out across portions of the central high plains. And this will eventually turn into a mesoscale convective system or complex. A few isolated cells on the far southern side here, according to the HRRR, that could actually end up going severe, and also a few storms down there to the south. Really, this goes through about 1 a.m. Eastern time on tomorrow, actually, and it's only depicting maybe a few isolated scattered storms out across Texas and Oklahoma today. In reality, I think there will be more storms than that, so let's actually turn to a different forecast model to see the solution there. So this is the NAM 3 kilometer here. So this is a high resolution NAM model. And we notice that it is a little bit different in the overall convective evolution. We'll kind of run this forward to just about the current time. We notice how these showers and storms ongoing across portions of the Gulf Coast states, widespread showers out across portions of those areas. And then we move forward into today and later this afternoon. We notice that widespread storms forming out here across the north central high plains. Isolated scattered storms developing out there across central Texas, a little bit more convectively active out there across central Texas, a few cells that tried to get going into Kansas. These initially could be some very large hail producers, and then a mesoscale convective complex of sorts tries to develop out here across the north central high plains and in through the Dallas area today. Looking at the shear values coming off the NAM 3 kilometer, we notice a few key things of interest here. First of all, out across the Gulf Coast states, increasing shear today to generally about 300 to 400 meters squared per second squared of 0 to 3 SRH. That will definitely allow the possibility for a few quick spin-up tornadoes out across those vicinities. And then notice how the shear values out across most of the risk area today, Texas into the central and northern really Great Plains here. We don't have a lot of SRH around in the atmosphere. Now, that doesn't mean we can't get supercells. Supercells can still be in this vicinity and working with any localized shear or boundary that, one storm might come across. But generally speaking, there's going to be low shear in this area for at least most of the day. That shear will build back though into the evening, so any storms that can really mature and be in this environment, especially down into Kansas, by the time we get into this evening, we'll have plenty of shear to work with, over about 500 meters squared per second squared of 0 to 3 SRH. That's going to be plenty for tornadoes, and any supercells that are in this environment with enough instability would be able to support a localized tornado threat in this area. However, instability will be the biggest question for today. In fact, if we actually just look at the surface-based CAPE that is forecast to be here by about this time, we notice that, again, surface-based instability far to the north, we're only maybe looking on the order of about 700 there, 1200 there. The biggest CAPE values, I think, are going to be down south here. Now, keep in mind, this is roughly at about 1 a.m. in the morning, and we've got 4,000 surface-based CAPE here on some of the forecast guidance. So there's going to be a lot of instability to work with, especially with southern extent. Now, the real question is, does that capping inversion break and allow for storms to develop? Forcing is going to be relatively on the low end with this type of setup, so we're going to need to rely on smaller mesoscale features for that lifting to occur. And so if that doesn't happen, storms won't go up. But if that does happen, storms could form, and look out. We had a couple of tornadoes actually yesterday, I believe, out there in Texas. So, just kind of goes to show that, any localized environment could produce some tornadoes. Something to take note of for tomorrow as well. This is the HRRR forecast, valid tomorrow at roughly about 5 p.m. Eastern time. We have a couple of complexes of thunderstorms out across the central and Midwest here. One complex here moving into portions of far southern Illinois into southwestern Indiana. And we notice that a couple of additional complexes of storms fire back up across the risk area for tomorrow. It's going through about 8 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. And we notice that, again, generally speaking, there is a few complexes of thunderstorms. And this is generally within that day 2 risk for severe storms. We plop on the overlay here. We notice that these storms are developing within this risk area. So it is entirely possible that we go partial of the day tomorrow without any convection, without any significant storms developing. However, there could be some strong to severe storms, especially where the forecast is here for tomorrow. And again, that higher end tornado threat exists going into the evening. Then tomorrow and into May 7th, we notice that storms form along the northern part of this area as well, and that could end up trickling down even further south. So this goes out to about 7 a.m. This is valid from 7 a.m. tomorrow morning until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning until 8 a.m. on the 7th. And we could see some strong storms moving into the area, generally speaking, before that time. And what to watch, even this northern extent here could see some strong to severe storms, maybe even as far north as Green Bay. So I wouldn't be surprised to see, based on this HRRR model, for the extension of this marginal risk into portions of really into Wisconsin, including places like then Chicago, Illinois, maybe extending out to far southwestern Indiana and central Indiana as well. So we'll keep a close eye on this, and of course we'll touch base on this again tomorrow. And finally, this is the GFS 2-meter dew point here. We notice that the severe weather threat is going to be in place for a pretty long time. This goes out to May 11th here. And we notice that, generally speaking, we have moisture in place, 70s, upper 60s, low 70s dew points out across the Central Plains for several more days here into about the next week or so. And even we're seeing dew points in the 60s out across portions of South Dakota, upper 50s, reaching the really into North Dakota and up into even Canada with upper 50s dew points, 70s dew points out across the south here. So we're going to be in for a long ride of severe weather out across the Central Plains, I do believe, for the next several days based on this latest guidance that is coming off the GFS. So lots of severe weather, lots of active weather that is going to be ongoing. It is the month of May, so make sure you stay tuned. We may even be out there chasing in a few weeks. We got a cruise coming up here in just a few weeks, but after that, we might be out in the Central Plains trying to get some tornadoes. So let's see what we can get into over the next several days. Be safe out there as well. So when we talk about the overall parameters for today, we notice that lift is going to be quite low out across central Texas. That's a given. However, moisture will be on the high end, generally dew points in the upper 60s to low 70s for today, with instability being extremely high today, generally speaking on the order of about 3,000 to 4,500 joules per kilogram, which is more than enough instability to support thunderstorms. Combine that with some moisture and heating of the surface with just enough lift today, I think we're going to get some big time thunderstorms out there that could be capable of producing some fairly significant hail out there in that area. However, shear will be on the low end for today, so the tornado threat overall is going to be quite limited, especially with southern extent. However, there might be one or two supercells are known to produce their own shear in their own environment, so it would not necessarily surprise me to see a tornado or two out across portions of central Texas with any of the stronger supercells for today. And then taking a look here at northern Kansas, really into Nebraska for today. Everything is pretty much on the moderate end today. Lifting increases with northern extent as you get closer to the axis of that trough. Moisture is somewhat limited with northern extent, so is instability, but the shear will be a little bit higher, which may support a little bit more of a greater tornado threat with any line-embedded storms or any supercells that can get established, especially later into the evening as shear begins to increase. And overall, the threat for today, the greatest significant potential, I think, is going to be that large hail threat. We're calling for a high-end threat, especially at across portions of central Texas today, where I think instability is going to be maximized. Combine that with moisture, I think you're going to have steep low-level lapse rates contributing to an increased significant hail potential, and even potentially some significant hail out across the central Great Plains today, northern Kansas into Nebraska. Flooding and wind threat, both a moderate risk there, low end chance for tornadoes, but cannot rule out a few, especially with any supercells today. So with that being said, I do hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Mike O'Malley. God bless, take care, and I'll talk to you guys again some more later.